Yeah, let me just start the recording. Okay. Um, Again, thank you everyone for joining us on a Saturday for the Without Barriers virtual meetup. So we today will be jumping into the session on the topic optimizing data connectivity in Dynamic 365, finance and operation. We have Anita Iswaran who is joining with us, and she is a Microsoft MVP. And she will be taking us to the topic, and she will introduce herself a little bit more during the session and take us through the session as well. And before we get into the session, I just want to mention this one more time that the session is recorded. No need to record on your end, and we'll also share the recording. And at the end of the session, there will be a form that's shared which is basically a feedback form, and you can fill it out to get your certificate of participation through your email. Okay, that is basically everything. And if you enjoy today's session, you enjoy these kind of topics, feel free to join our community where we share about similar topics and challenges and hackathons in our community. If you're interested, feel free to join. I will share the links in the chat box. Thank you everyone again for joining, and let's jump into the session. Over to Anita.
Yeah. Hello all. Thank you for joining the session over a weekend in between your busy schedule. Thanks again for Surat for organizing and hosting me to present this informative session. And today's agenda is about the speaker, that's me. Then why the data connectivity matters and what are the key connectivity scenarios, and then what are the available integration tools and technologies. So what are the key parameters to be considered for the integration, and we will be diving deep into the OData concept as well, and then we will be finishing our session with the question and answer. Myself, Anita Ishwaran, I have 19 plus years of experience in this Dynamics world. So I started my career with Accepta. It was like a blue screen where we will enter the login, password, and all this. So and it was Accepta 2.5, I started my career. So now I am continuing with the D365 F&O, along with that the integration. I am residing in United Kingdom. I have been a part of this Microsoft MVP club since 2 years, and I am the author of the blog where I have mentioned in the screen as well, and I am also active in the LinkedIn, and you can subscribe to my newsletters where I usually share the latest updates, what is happening in the Dynamics world, in the Dynamics ecosystem. And in my blog, I will be sharing the knowledge, what I have learned as a part of my assignments. So without further delay, let us continue on our topic. So why the data connectivity matters here? We are in the era of digital transformation, right? So everything where the data plays a crucial role everywhere, correct? So it always demands a real time and the connected data. So what is real time? It is an up-to-date data. So if the business is not having the correct or the proper data or the latest data, then we will not be able to proceed with the other processes here, correct? So similarly, it is applicable for the ERP Dynamics 365 F&O because it powers the crucial business functions like finance, supply chain, and operations. So where the data plays the major role in performing the day-to-day activities. So the data is present in F&O. So how do you communicate or take the data or retrieve the data to the external world? So that is where the integration comes into picture. So there should be a seamless integration where the user will not know what is happening behind the screen, okay, where you are extracting the data or you are reading the data or updating the data, whatever the current operations, create, read, update, delete. So whatever the data that is happening, the process happening behind the screens, it will be called as a seamless integration. So this is the key for automation, analytics, and agility. So what is automation here? You are going to automate the extraction or the transformation or loading the data, okay? So which is going to be automated without any manual intervention. That is one of the key part in the integration. Analytics. So if you want to transform the data, so that is where the analytics comes into picture. We have Synapse, Fabric, we have Azure Data Factory, you have Logic Apps. So all this integration middlewares helps in analyzing and transforming the data. And agility. So because of the agile nature in the integration, the concept of the integration, because of this agile nature, the seamless integration becomes a part of this data automation. Okay. So what happens when the data connectivity is poor? Okay, so you don't have a proper data connectivity. It might lead to latency issue because, for instance, your business needs to have the data, a real-time data, at least once in an hour, the data has to be updated. So if you don't have a proper data connectivity, that might lead to inconsistent data latency issues. And the next is data inconsistency. So for instance, you are connecting the two systems and the data is sent across the systems. And if one system is having the proper data, and if you don't have the proper, I mean, the data is not synced to the other system, obviously it will lead to data inconsistency, right? So that is also one of the key here. And business process will be a breakdown here. And because of this, we will have some impact on the business also. What are the key connectivity scenarios here? Inbound integrations. So since I am speaking from the D365 F&O perspective, maybe you can pause me in case if you want to have further insights. So inbound integration in F&O means that you are getting the data into F&O from the external sources. For instance, you can get the data from the Salesforce, or you can get the data from the SAP. You have lots of connectors where the data can be sent to F&O from the external sources. Okay, you can even read the file from Excel, SharePoint, or SFTP. You can send the data to F&O. So this is called inbound integration. And the next one is outbound integration. What is outbound? Then, as the name suggests, the data is pushed out to the other system. For instance, I am saying you are maintaining some master data. And since there are two systems connected, for instance, F&O is connecting with the Salesforce. Okay. So, and if the master is residing in F&O, then you need to make sure whatever the master you have created in F&O should also be reflected to the Salesforce, correct? So that is where the outbound integration comes into picture. So the data is pushed to the external systems. It need not be an external application. It can even go to Azure Blob, or it can even go to the SharePoint SFTP. That is, it depends on the connector or requirement what you are based on. And the next is the real-time APIs. So to perform this inbound and outbound integrations, you need to have some APIs, right? So which one would you select depends on whether you want a real-time one or a asynchronous one. So if it is a real-time, we call it as a synchronous one. So how do you send the data in a real-time way? One is business event, that helps in sending the data to the outside the F&O via the business event. And this is only one-way communication. Business event only sends the data from F&O. The next is OData. OData, it is a bidirectional. So it can read the data from F&O and it can also do the other operations, the write operations or the update or the delete operations in F&O. In both the ways, this is bidirectional. Similarly with the custom service also. So these are all the real-time APIs, which means that if you want the data to be reflected in a real-time manner, at least at near real-time means, then these scenarios can be applicable. The next is batch or asynchronous data flows. We call it as a recurring imports and exports. For instance, you need to export something for the transactions every 1 hour once or after the business hours. Then you can do you can set up a recurrence in F&O or even outside the system. So I mean, in the next slides, I will be explaining how do you set the recurrence import or export. So that technology, that feature, I will be able to show that in the next slides. So you will be able to set up the recurring import and export. So the data is exported or imported periodically to and from F&O. And how is all this possible? That is via the third-party integration tools. So because your data is present in F&O, but without any external application, without any middleware. So you can also have a custom service, but you are giving an additional load to the system. But if you bring a third-party integration tool here, then it will be a seamless integration where the transformation, extraction, transformation, and loading will be fully on the integration tool. What are the integrations tool? We have Azure Logic Apps, we have Power Platform, Azure Service Bus, Data Factory. So all these tools will have a different feature where you need to identify which one best suits your scenario or the requirement and then decide according to that. So available integration tools and the services and the technologies. So if I remember, if in the previous slide I had told you about the batch or synchronous or data flows, correct? So that is where the DIXF comes into picture, data management framework in FNO. What is the data management framework? It runs on a SSIS package where it can handle the voluminous data for export or import purposes. So the volume is not a constraint here. You can send even 10,000, 20,000, a lakh record for importing or exporting. The DIXF takes care of doing it without impacting the performance. So for any voluminous data, import or export, then the DIXF is suggested. And OData and custom services, it will be for near real time, but it will not be able to handle the voluminous data. And the business event, what I have told you, it is only for sending the data out from the FNO to the external system. So you can capture the event sent from the payload sent from the business event via a service bus or an event grid, and then you can process it and send it to the end system. That is how the business event works. Other integration services, like how are they connected, is via logic apps. You can consume the business event via logic apps. Even you can trigger the business event, the data DIXF using the logic apps. You can send the voluminous data to using DIXF via logic apps. And even service bus, where you have in the business event, you have an option to connect to the service bus. So the service bus, it is not necessary that the receiver and the sender need to be online at the time when the transfer is happening, which means that you can drop the data, the sender can drop the data anytime, and it is not necessary the receiver has to be immediately process the data. It can pick the data from the service bus queue in its own recurrence, okay? And similarly with the event grid also. The other concept, other technology is a dual write. So where you will be able to connect with the CE or the field service. This is also a near real time, but this is based on the Dataverse and the Power Platform setup. So we have everything is based on the entities. This dual write is based on the entity, data entity, what we call in FNO. What are the parameters would you consider when you design an integration? One is the data volume. So you need to understand what is the volume of the data. See, for instance, when you are designing the designing for the integration, there are many parameters you need to consider. I have mentioned the key parameters here, so that which helps you to design your integration in an efficient way. The first is data volume. So you need to ask what is the data volume will be sent during a day, or during the peak hours, what will be the data volume, and during the non-peak hours, what will be the data volume. For instance, this is where you will be able to decide whether you need to use the DIXF, the data management framework approach, or the real time. For instance, if the data volume is very less, for instance, it is 10 records per hour, or if it is 50 records per 4 hours, then in that case, we can select, you can choose for the OData. Or if the volume is more, for instance, the customer is going to send at end of the day, after the business hour, they are going to send transactions, a huge amount of transactions, say for instance, 50K transactions, the records to FNO. So in that case, maybe then you need to opt for the DIXF. So here, getting the idea on what is the data volume is important. Also, for every business, you will have peak and non-peak hours, correct? So even the season, there will be some peak and non-peak season. So that also should be considered when you take the data volume. Frequency. So the next is data. After data volume comes the frequency. How frequently do you want to integrate your data? So do you want a real-time data? Yes, then in that case, you need to define, you need to design your integration using some real-time approach. If the data can be sent in, if the data is not needed, like it can be integrated once in 4 hours, or after business hours, or once in an hour, you can integrate the data. Then also you can decide which one to use for your integration. Sync or async. Sync or async is also connected to the frequency. Sync means it is near real time. The moment you create something here, it has to be reflected in the other system in a minute or two. So almost near real time, you are going to sync the data. So in that case, the frequency you cannot define. It is in real time data. That is where the sync here. Asynchronous mode means like it is a recurrence again. So you can send the data periodically. So in that case, you need to understand what is the frequency you need to use when you use this async method. There are many, I mean, this is just a repeating slides, but I have given some parameters for which integration pattern, what are all the other parameters you need to consider. For instance, in case of OData or the custom service, you will be able to send 6,000 records in a 5-minute window. Okay, so if there is more than 6,000 records, then we will end up in throttling. There is something called as throttling, where the system will no more able to get further request, be it a write request or a read request. It will stop there. That is called throttling. So in case of OData or the custom service, the throttling is high. So the limit should be 6K for a 5-minute window. And this is that you can do a 52 concurrent request. For instance, I can trigger a 6K window. I can trigger 6K records, and the other user can trigger another 6K record. So it is all a real time. So the frequency is this one, and it is a real time service. So we have Excel integration also, where you can export the data to Excel, where it does the current operation. You can read the data, you can create the data, you can update the data, you can delete the data also via the Excel integration. So this exports maximum 10K records, and the import is happening in 100 in batch. There is a batch, and you also can set the a parameter in the FNO where you can set the limit, where I want to export 20K records, 30K records. But what would happen is, the more the limit, there will be some impact in the performance. Okay. The frequency is ad hoc. Whenever you want to export the data from any table or form, it is an ad hoc request. You don't need to schedule before time. So thus it becomes a near real-time scenario. Event driven. What is event driven? That is where the business event comes here. For instance, it can send 64 kilobytes of data here per message. So if the payload is more than 64 KB, then it will not be, it will fail here. This is one of the limitation in the business event. But then usually we won't get the voluminous payload. So if the payload is more, then in that case, you need to go for the DIXF, where there is no limit on the payload there. So the business event, the volume will be 64 KB per message. And as I said, it is ad hoc. Whenever there is some event happening, for instance, I am posting an invoice. Okay. So during that time, I need to send a message to the end system. So it is an ad hoc, immediate. That is also near real time. The batch data API. Batch data API, it has a large volume. It supports the large volume. For instance, if you are able to send, if your file is having some 20K records or 50K records, or 75K record, then you can use this batch data API. Obviously, it cannot be in real time, because if you see the real time scenario, it can handle max to max 6K per window, correct? So for the large volume, then we should go for the batch data API. And it can be set on a recurrence basis, because you cannot push a large volume immediately in 1 minute in a frequency of a minute or so, because even the system has to take some time to process this large volume, right? So immediately you cannot do recurrences is suggested to define the frequency here. And thus it falls in the asynchronous pattern. I hope this clarifies for you to choose which integration pattern you need to decide when it comes to the volume, frequency, and the real time here. So batch data APIs. So the batch data APIs, as I said, it is operating on the asynchronous mode. So there are two types of APIs here. One is the recurring integration API, and the other one is DIXF package API. So what is the difference? These are all operating in the batch mode, and it is on the concept of DIXF only, but it differs in few steps, few parameters. You can define the recurrence integration. You can schedule it inside the FNO, okay? But in this case of the package API, you can schedule outside the FNO, which means that this package API will be scheduled maybe in the logic apps, okay? You can schedule this from the logic apps and trigger the DIXF FNO to send the data for you or import the data for you. So this means that you are scheduling outside the FNO, which means that the logic apps or the external system decides the frequency here for you. In case of recurrence API, you are scheduling inside the FNO, which means FNO is deciding when it has to send or import or export the data for you. And the recurring API supports both file and data packages. Files means it can be, you have a source data format called Excel, CSV with pipe delimiter, okay, and all these file formats are supported. Data package is a zip, is in a zip format where you have a data file, manifest file, and the package header, where it will be sent as a zip file to FNO, and then the data will be extracted. It carries the metadata along with the data. That is what this data package is having. And this package API, it only supports the data packages, not the files. And it is possible to do the XSLT transformation here. Now it is going to be deprecated. So, but here it supports the XSLT transformation. In the package API, the transformation is external. The reason being, if you see the first point, because it is scheduling outside the FNO, correct? For instance, the Logic Apps or the Power Automate or the Azure Data Factory is scheduling outside the FNO. So in that case, the transformation of the data is also to be handled outside the FNO only. And it supports both, it supports the cloud integration, okay, where, but in this case, it is applicable to both on-premises and cloud environments. The recurrence integration APIs are NQ, DQ. NQ, DQ is nothing but NQ is you are importing the data. DQ is you are exporting the data. Acknowledgement means which you are telling you are giving a message that the data is received, acknowledgement. If you want to get the status of the message, hey, I have sent this message for you. What is the status? So you can use this get message status API to retrieve the status of your data or the message. And in this case, it is import from package, like how you have in NQ. Here it is import from package, because here only data package is supported, right? So NQ can be mapped to this import from package, then export to package. Okay, export to packages, you are going to export the data in a package format. The package is a zip format which has the data and the metadata. And using the other APIs, get Azure write URL, import staging URL, you will be able to get the status of the data, or you can store the data in one of the block storage and then send it across. So these are all just the difference how, and also it will help you to decide which recurrence pattern you need to use when it comes for the batch APIs. The next is the real time. So here we are going to little bit deep dive into the OData scenarios, right? So OData, as I said, just to recall, it is a real-time scenario. Okay, it is an open data protocol. So it is a standardized protocol for building and consuming the RESTful APIs. So what is standardized? So OData helps you to focus on your business logic while building the RESTful APIs, which means that the users or the developers, they don't need to worry about the approaches like what is there in the request, what is there in the response, what is the status code, what is the HTTP methods, what are all the URL conventions, what should be the payloads. All this they don't need to worry about it. That is why it is called as standardized one. And the REST based, it operates on the principle of representational state transfer. So that is why it is making it straightforward to use. REST means representational state transfer protocol. Since it is it is a client friendly, because it simplifies the data sharing and the integration between the different systems, because you have the flexibility to create your own API. Correct? So that is why it is simplified, and it is also client friendly because it is based on the convention. It is very straightforward for the client applications to consume the data services using OData. So they can be a simple web browser or even the mobile apps or even the advanced enterprise level applications here. Okay, what happens when you combine OData with FNO? So you can access the data easily. So with OData, FNO developers, they can easily access the business data without having the need for any additional custom services. So for instance, there is no, you have so many standard data entities here, okay? And you can consume it straightforward. In case if you want to add some missing fields or any minor customization, that is not going to take much time also. So in that way, the data access is very easy here. So this makes it easy for the FNO to integrate with other systems. For instance, you can call this OData service from Logic Apps, or even from a Postman also you can call this web service to this OData service. That makes it easy here. And you can build your own custom apps. So the developers can build the custom apps that can leverage the power and the data in the FNO. So here there is no restriction. It can be a cross-platform mobile or even the web applications here. And report and analyze data. So since it is very supportive in extracting the data, right? It can be helpful in reporting and analyzing using the Power BI. For instance, the Power BI can consume the data entity and it can create the report. It can create the Power BI report in an easy way. So because the data entity is ready for it to do the job. Okay. And not only Power BI, any external system it can consume for this reporting purpose. And it can enhance the integration because FNO can integrate more seamlessly with other platforms, right? As I told, it can integrate with Logic Apps, Power Automate, any other middleware, right? So, and it is all a seamless integration, right? So it enhances the values and reach of the platform here. So that with this OData, the integration is enhanced with FNO. And this is not the only factor. I mean, these are not the only advantage what I have mentioned. There are few more advantages here. You don't need to worry about the authentication and the authorization because access to the FNO data is via OData is always protected by the authentication and authorization. Maybe in the next few minutes, I will be able to show you how do I create the authorization in the Azure, so that with that you will be able to connect this point here. So because this ensures the data security. Obviously, data is an asset to any organization, right? So our responsibility when you are exposing the data, it has to be authenticated and authorized, right? Otherwise, the data will go for toss here. So next is standardized access. Then OData, it provides a consistent way to access the data. Like there is only one format. There is no complex format to access the data here. So it makes it easy for the developer to build the integration with FNO and without having to learn any underlying APIs. It is very easy. It is straightforward data access mechanism here, and it is metadata driven. And what it exposes the metadata document that describes the structure of the data. So if you want to understand, if you're retrieving the data from a table, you need to, for instance, there might be from my architect level, I need to understand what is the metadata, and I cannot straightforwardly send the data to the table, correct? I need to understand what is the index, what are all the key fields, what is the mandatory field. So all this I need to understand. Only then I will be able to create or update the data. All the third operations I will be able to do it, right? So in order to understand the metadata, even OData, it is possible to, it exposes the metadata document also, which describes the structure of the data, which can be used by the tools and the application, right? And build the dynamics UIs and process. It is a cross-platform compatibility. And since OData is based on the web standards like HTTP or the JSON, it can even expose the data in the JSON format, right? So any applications from different platforms, they can easily consume the data that are exposed through OData. Then the rich query capabilities. You have lots of query options to query the data. For instance, you have the master data as thousands of master data you have in a table. You want to query only to query the recent ones. So you can apply a filter. Hey, send me the data which was created today. Send me the data which was created in the last week. You have the aggregate function. You can even take the sum of the numerical fields that is possible. And if you want to take a count, I wanted to understand the count of these records, count of the masters customers which were created last week. So you can get a count. So all this rich, because of this query cover, you can even sort the record. You can even sorting. I mean, you wanted to sort the record in ascending order or descending order. All these are possible. So this makes more efficient for the apps to retrieve the data only what we want. So unnecessary data you don't need to take into picture. You send me only this data with the filter, with the aggregate option, you are done. You get the net data, what is only necessary for you. And the security. So as usual, so security is tied up with this authentication and authorization. So we have this user-based access also. And also this is based on the user rules. So not everybody will be able to access the data from a system. So there is also a user control, and it is the data is limited based on the rules what we give to the user. Extendability. So same. So for instance, if you want to add some fields or you want to add some additional logic in the OData, that is also possible, which which is called the extensibility here. For instance, I wanted to add some fields or some data. Okay, it is not only you are going to use the standard fields. You might also have some fields for your requirement, correct? So even that can be handled without without complex issues here. And because of all this, the development time is reduced. The time taken for the development and the integration is significantly reduced because of all these capabilities. So in summary, we can say the integration of OData with the FNO provides the business with an efficient and standardized flexible way to access their data, facilitating the integration. It is not only integration, reporting, as well as the development. So these are all the major points what we consider when we use the OData. So the OData, as I said, everything works based on the entity. So we have data entity and FNO. So in the screen, what you see is data entity. Okay, and data entity is nothing but a collection of tables. Okay, the normalized table. For instance, if you take a customer table, it will have a customer master, address, contact, and if you want any other custom table to be added, if you have a proper relation address between these two tables, it can be added to the data source. So it is a view which is a collection of all the normalized table. You can call it as a normalized view, and it will help you in, you can with this entity, it will be able to do, you will be able to do all the current operations: create, read, update, delete. So everything in the OData works on entity. Okay, so this is how the entity looks in FNO. What is an entity key here? This is like an index field. For instance, I need to update something. So this key comes into picture. What is the index key field here? It allows you to identify a unique record. So for instance, if you have a customer group 10, you will not be able to create customer group 10 in the same legal entity. So that is where this key comes into picture. It is not necessary the entity will have only one customer key, one entity key. It will also be a combination of multiple keys. For instance, in the case of the postal entity, you will have the customer account number, against which legal entity is there, the location ID, and what is the effective date from which the address is effective. So these are all the combination of the keys here. So it is not necessary you should have only one key. The entity will have multiple keys, multiple unique keys to identify a record there. So this is where the concept of entity keys comes into picture. The naming convention. Here the naming convention in OData plays a major role here, because if you send a wrong naming convention of the field, even it is case sensitive also. So if you send a lowercase instead of an uppercase, then it will not be able to fetch the record. It will throw the error straight away. For instance, you have a public collection name. So against each entity, you have a public collection name. So we will be able to query the entity using the public collection name, not via the entity name. Okay, so if you go to the properties, there is a property called as public collection name. Even that is case sensitive. For instance, if it is customer groups where C and G are in uppercase, and by mistake, if you send customer capital, the uppercase C, followed by, instead of the uppercase G, if you give a lowercase g, then it will not be able to get you the data. It will throw you an error that no such entity exists, including the field names. Where is the field name comes into picture? The field name here is if you see the field names, these are all, it's a camel case. You will have an uppercase, lowercase here. Even when you are sending the field name in your request, it should be having this format, not the format without following this convention. If you attempt to give a wrong field name, the convention, the case sensitive, then it will not fetch you the data. It will end up in error. It is the same case with OData action also. I will explain you what is the OData action in the coming slides. So which entity to choose? So for instance, we have various entities in FNO. Like I am importing the sales orders here. Okay. So which entity would I choose? So for instance, if you open the development environment, you will have sales header V2 entity, sales header V4 entity. Okay. So it is always advisable to choose the entity which is having the latest version, because the previous version might become obsolete in any time. For instance, if you see this V2 entity, in the current version, it is the property is obsolete is set to yes, which means that it will no longer be supporting your data import or export. So this should not be used. And the next is, for instance, here V4 entity. And if you see what I have given you is public. So this is supported is public, which means that it is OData enabled. And if you remember, I have mentioned about the public collection name in my previous slide. So we will be querying the data using OData with this public collection name and not with this data entity name. For instance, if you query with sales order header V4 entity, you will not get the data. You need to query using sales order headers V4 entity. Only then you will be able to get the data, and make sure the naming conventions are followed and the naming conventions and the case sensitive methods are followed properly here. So you need to choose a proper entity which is having the latest version, because in the latest upgrade, the previous, I mean in the recent upgrade, the previous version would have got obsolete. App registration. Okay, so you can connect where this authentication and authorization comes into picture. So everywhere the communication happens via the app registration here. So what is app registration? Because the main purpose of app registration is to ensure a trust relationship between your application. For instance, my application is F&O and the Microsoft Identity Platform. Okay, so you are going to establish a trust between these two applications, between your application and the Microsoft Identity Platform. Only then, which means that your application, when it receives a request from this app registration, it can understand this is, I am getting the request from a reliable source. Okay, and this is a unidirectional, which means that the Microsoft Identity Platform is not relying on your application, but your application is relying on the app registration which you have created in the platform, the Microsoft platform. And it cannot be moved between the different tenants also. Let me pause on this and then I will come to the app registration, how it is created. Do you see my screen? The Azure portal screen. And if you go to Azure portal, you have this Microsoft Entra ID. Here in the manage, it is called, there is something called as app registration. Okay. And you can click on the new registration. For instance, okay, and here you have an option to give whether you want to support only your tenant, which means that the ID what you are going to use will be used only within your tenant. In case if you want to support for multiple tenants, I don't want, for instance, you might the users external to your system also might use. So in that case, you can choose for the multi-tenant. Also, if you want to have using for the personal accounts also, then in that case, you can use for this accounts in any organizational directory, for instance, Skype or Hotmail, whatever it is. Otherwise, you can choose only for the Microsoft personal accounts, that on Microsoft.com accounts, you can use it. If you are implementing for any customer, then it is better to go with a single tenant. The reason being, only the data which most of your data lies in the same tenant current. It won't be going across the other tenant. So for this one, for the customer perspective, then it is better to go with the first approach. You give the name and you click register. So it doesn't take much time to create. And if you see, this is the application ID. So this is the ID which you will be using in your token generation. For instance, you are sending certain requests to your application, to your F&O, right? So this is the ID which you will be using to pass your data in the authorization header. And this is the tenant. For instance, as I told you, right, it will be across the tenant or multi-tenants. So this is my tenant, and this app registration, what I have created, can be used only within my tenant. So if a different tenant is trying to access my client ID, then it won't be possible. And if you want to create, so anybody can take this client ID, right? So along with the client ID, you should have some secret code also. Okay. For that, you need to go to the certificates and secrets. Here you have an option to create new client secret. It is a user-defined name. Okay, it is ideally recommended for 180 days. After that, you will get a notification that it will be expiring. At least some 10-15 days before, you will be notified in the Azure portal that it is nearing expiry. If you want to still go take for a few more months, then you can set it as 24 months. So as of now, I am going with this recommended one. So I add this. Okay, since I am sharing, I am unable to add. Give me a second. Okay, let me add. Sorry. Okay. So here, if you see, there will be a value and the secret. Value is what you will be using it for our communication, for the authorization token. So here, this value, we need to copy paste it somewhere. The reason being, after an hour, I mean, maximum it will be visible here for 30 minutes or so. After that, you will be able to see only the first two letters followed by star, star, star. So here itself, you will get an alert. Client secrets, it cannot be viewed except for immediately after the creation. So make sure you save the secret before leaving the page. So make sure you copy this value somewhere, only the secret value, but anytime you will be able to retrieve this client ID, tenant ID anytime. How do you give permission? How do you authorize this app registration is allowed to communicate with the FNO? Go to API permission. So here you can, by default, the Microsoft Graph will have the read permission. If you want to add the permission for Dynamics, you will have ample options to API permissions to be given for CRM, Dynamics ERP, DevOps, all this. So in my case, I will select the Dynamics ERP and you can have the delegated permission. Here you can give full access. So if you want to give full access, you can choose this. Or if you want to give only for the custom service, you can choose this. If you want to give for the OData, because if your purpose is only the OData perspective, then you can give this one. So here I am giving selecting the OData here, followed by that. Okay. Okay. And again, you need to give, since I am sharing the screen, it is not allowing me to save here. Sorry for that. And then the application permission. So here also you should be able to give this is mandatory. You need to give full access to the connector. So this is where you are completing this app registration. So if now you can relate to what I have told you about the app authentication and authorization. So via this app registration, you will be authorizing the request to the application, what is consuming it. So this is what this app registration means. So the main steps here are create the app registration, create the secret, save the secret value somewhere because it will become invisible after some time, and then set the application API permissions for whichever app you wanted. Now back to our slide. So I think this point is clear now. So as I said, if you understand what is tenant, so it cannot be moved across the tenant. The app registration, what I have created, it cannot be moved to a different tenant. Query filters. So if you remember, I had told you the query options, right? The rich query capabilities in one of my the previous slides. So which means which will get you the data only which you need. For instance, I want to get the count of the customer groups, what I have. You can easily get this using the get request. Get is a read request. So via the read request, you can set the count as true and it will get you the data, what is number of records, what is present in the customer group. For instance, you need to get the query across the other company also. For instance, it will bring you only from the default company. If you want to get the data across the company, then you need to filter the cross company keyword, and then you need to give the filter as what is the data area ID you want. For instance, by default, if your default company is USMF, the first query would return you the count from the USMF. But if you want to get the data from USRP, then you need to give this keyword cross company and the filter from which company you are planning to get. Select. And if you append this select, for instance, the table has 20 fields and you don't need to have all the 20 fields. You don't need to get the details about all the 20 fields, right? You want only certain fields, like 4 or 5 fields. If you get in your response, that is fine. So you can also mention your fields, what you need in the select keyword. Okay. and order by. For instance, this is the order by permission. You can either, by default, it will be in the ascending. If you specifically mention as descending, then it will be in the descending order. For instance, I want to sort the data of my customer in customer account number should be sorted in the ascending order or the descending order, or sort the name by ascending. So that will be handled in this get request. So get is a read operation. Post is a write operation. You are creating the data in your application. So all this is for all this request, you will be attaching the authentication token also, which we have created using the app registration earlier. So via this, we will be able to create the data with the necessary payload to our application. For the delete, you will be able to see these two additional parameters. What are these? These are all the entity key fields. For instance, if you remember, I told you the entity key fields will be present in all the standard entities. Even it is a best practice to have an entity key in all your entities. So if you want to delete or update something, then the entity keys comes into picture here. For instance, I want to delete some record from the sales order pools. Then pass the pool ID followed by the data area ID in your request. Then it does the job. But if you pass this without this, even if you miss one of the parameter, one of the entity key field here, then you will not be able to do that the request what you have sent, be it patch or delete. Patch is then update. So there also you are going to pass the entity key fields here. So I hope this clears what is the point where I meant about the rich query options. So using this query filters, I have it in my blog as well as in my GitHub handle, where I have uploaded the Postman collection, where I have almost created close to 50 queries using this OData filters, OData query filters. So you can have a look at it maybe when you get time. So you can refer to my blog or in my GitHub handle. OData action. So if you want to understand what is OData action, if you remember in one of my previous slides, I told about OData action. So there are already standard OData option. There is no big, it's a simple one where you are creating a normal method. Okay, but what is the difference between this method and the normal method? You are decorating this with OData action attribute. So a normal method, you cannot consume it in your API. For instance, you cannot call it from the Logic Apps, or you cannot call it from the Postman or Power Automate, blah, blah, blah. You cannot consume it. But if the method is exposed as OData action, then you will be able to call it from your external app. So you have there are already so many OData actions defined in the standard. On top of it, you will also be able to create your custom OData action. So for instance, you are sending the data. You will ask, where is this OData action applicable? Okay. For instance, you have a customer, you are using an entity to import the ledger journal records. Okay. You import the header and the journal lines. Okay. So the next requirement is you import, as soon as you import, you post it. So the current entity doesn't support the posting. Okay. So in that case, you can create an OData action. Okay. You can create an OData action and then include the posting logic in it, and then call this OData action separately in your external application or the middleware. See if the record creation is success. Okay. You will be able to get the record ID, I mean the journal ID, correct? Pass the journal ID in your OData action method. This method receives the parameter as well, and then do the job for you, do the posting for you. So these are all the scenarios where it can help you to apply the OData action. I hope this clears. The OData action, the normal methods, it cannot be consumed from the external APIs, external apps. But if you expose the method with the OData action attribute, it is decorated with OData action attribute, then it makes that method to be exposed and consumed from the external system. I hope this clears OData action. We have reached the end of the session, and let me just conclude by just telling you a quick recap of what are all the key takeaways. So we understood what are all the available integration tools and technologies, where we visited about the DIXF, OData, business events, and other integration services. And what are all the parameters for integration? So that is which is the deciding factor, which integration design to choose when you work on this requirement. These are all the key factors. There are so many factors, but I have picked the key ones. So these are all the parameters which I usually apply when I work on the integration requirement. And batch data APIs. What is the difference between the batch data APIs here? And we learned about OData action, how it can be consumed, and how to create a app registration here. This screen I purposely avoided because this will become too technical in the FNO perspective. So usually whatever we have created in this app registration, we will be mapping it in our application in a FNO, where you will be, where the app registration client ID, what we have created, it will be mapped here. So the screen I didn't leave because it will be too FNO perspective. And we also learned what happens when we combine OData with FNO. So these are all the advantages we understood, and the query filters. So the rich query capabilities, which you can use from my GitHub handle or from my blog also, where I have given almost close to 25 to 40 queries. Yeah, I have given. So you can make use of it. Yeah, I think we have reached the end of the session. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Let me stop my sharing.
Thank you, Anita, for the session. I think we went over a lot of things, and I don't think there was many questions. If there are any questions, I would suggest that you guys drop as a message, or you guys do have the access to mic. If anybody wants to directly ask, that can also be possible.
Maybe
I'm
the
just gonna
chat
share.
also, I think it is not, it is little bit, I mean, that is disabled, Surat. Maybe you can get the details later if our audience is having any questions. I am unable to access my chat window.
I can see that people are actually
Okay.
commenting, but there is no questions about it.
Okay.
I'll let them know that they can ask me questions in the community, and if there is something that we will require your help, I can forward it to you.
Sure. Yeah.
And I've also shared the certificate link in the chat box. I hope everybody else is having the access to it. Please do check it out and fill out so that we can send out your certificate. And again, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you Anita again for taking the time and making the event possible, and taking this time to be, spending time to create the presentation, spend time on it, and how it needs to be done takes a lot of effort. Just wanted to make sure that you appreciated for doing the session. Yeah,
Thank
we
you so
hope to
much.
have you again if possible. Yeah, and have a great weekend, and we'll see you in the next one, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah. Have a great weekend. Thanks all. Bye.